Okay, so something I wanted to talk about, which has come up in my life a lot, is power dynamics. And I think that this is something very important that people don't recognize, at least not innately. They don't instinctively recognize it. Some people do, but it's something that I had to learn about before I recognized it. So power dynamics are the differences and balances of power between people. So this is important in the cases in Hollywood, like Harvey Weinstein, and a lot of the other rape and molestation cases that are going on, because the people who did that, Matt Bauer, Harvey Weinstein, off the top of my head, those are the two main ones that pop up. They have a lot of power because they have influence. People like them. People think they're nice people. At least Matt Bauer had a lot of that. Was like he has this feeling of like, oh, the dad type character, and people really like that. And so the public is on his side in that respect. For both of them, they have money, they have influence, and they have a stable job. And for Harvey Weinstein, the ability to give people a job. So there's this power that they have where when they approach someone for sexual favors, or more than that, even if it was in good, even if it was with good intentions and they were nice about it and stuff, it's still this power dynamic that everyone should be aware of, everyone involved, because someone might feel pressured because they might have that insinuation due to the power dynamic that, oh, maybe if I sleep with this person, they'll be nicer to me, maybe they'll get me a job. What happens if I reject this person? And that's a really important thing, is recognizing when people are afraid to say no due to power dynamics. There are plenty of reasons that people are afraid to say no, and I could get into that, but that would be a whole longer spiel. So recognizing that people, when power is unevenly distributed, that people are afraid to say no. So someone famous is like, people are always like, oh, I'd love to sleep with a famous person. So someone might feel like, oh, if I turn this down, people will like wonder why I said no and like kind of shame me for not sleeping with a famous person when I had the chance. There's also the dynamic of like, what will this person do if I say no? Are they going to fire me? Are they going to blacklist me? Which is something Harvey Weinstein did a lot. Are they going to make it so that I can't get a job just because I don't sleep with them this one time? And being homeless or having to work a job you hate because you didn't want to have sex with someone. So that's a power dynamic. There are a lot more mundane power dynamics. It doesn't have to be, and this is something I'm so irritated with, the Harvey Weinstein initiated movement of hashtag Me Too, is a lot of people are like, okay, so yeah, I get power dynamics. So if a rich guy like Harvey Weinstein wants to like force sex on people and he can give them jobs and stuff, I get that, but that's like few and far between. No, it's actually not as few and far between as a lot of people say or think. And power dynamics come in all shapes and sizes, much like people. So there are a lot of different ones. Like, I have a friend who was sexually harassed by his manager at a grocery store just because the guy had a crush on him, and then when my friend turned him down, he was angry. So he started harassing my friend at work, and the friend of mine is a guy. So it's not just women who are being sexually harassed either. There's all kinds of identities that are being harassed. So yeah, he was being harassed by his manager just because he wouldn't have sex with him. And it became an issue where due to his own past trauma, he was afraid to what would happen if he said no, and he was afraid of like being direct about it, so he just kept saying like oh no thanks and stuff like that, and like no, and like turning him down, but not being like no, leave me alone type thing. So he wasn't forceful about it, but he kept saying no. And that power dynamic of, it was his boss, like it was his manager, and he had say enough where he could say like to someone else in charge and be like, hey, I don't like this guy, we should fire him type thing. And like he was in charge of him, so he had to listen to him while he was at work, even though this was someone who was sexually harassing him. It was not fun. Yeah, I had to help him through that. So yeah, so recognizing power dynamics, it helps me a lot. It helps me go into a situation when I have more power and when I have less power, and recognizing that I have a certain amount of power and I should not abuse it is very important. And I think that is something that a lot of more people should recognize. But also, for me, something that's important too is I know enough people that it's frustrating, and by frustrating I mean it ticks me off a lot, who don't have any power and yet project an image to other people as if they do have power. I've known two people come to mind when I think of this, and they're both men, so I'm probably going to use he pronouns with this, but there are plenty of people who are female as well. That was said weird, whatever. Plenty of women who do this as well. But no one actually likes them, but they project an image, like the way they act as if everyone likes them and as if they're always going to get their way. So sometimes they can trick you into thinking, oh, this person has influence, this person has power, which is a good trick to use yourself if you want to get out of a situation, is to project an image of like, I have more power than I actually have in this situation. But yeah, so they act like everyone likes them, even though very few people actually like them. Like, this is totally based on experience. Like, I've talked to people afterwards and they've been like, yeah, no, I don't really like them. They're pushy, they're loud, obnoxious, they don't listen to me. And that's typically what it is they don't actually care what other people think, so they just project an image of what they actually want people to think. And so that can trick you into thinking that this person actually has power, when they don't. And recognizing the actual power structure rather than saying like, oh, this person acts like they have power, so they probably do. Recently, I was in a room with someone I had already cut off contact with, and we were in the same location. And that person, one of the people who projects power that they don't have. And luckily I was able to recognize that, because my instinct is to go, oh, they're projecting power, I should shrink away, I should collapse into myself and not have the power that I actually have. But luckily, people actually like me. And I actually have a sense of influence. And I have the power to speak up for myself. I have the power to defend myself. I'm willing to do those things. I'm willing to say, no, knock it off. I'm willing to ignore people I don't want to talk to. I'm willing to be within that space and be myself without caring what negative people say and think. And I have worked at that for a long time. As I talked about last week, it came from knowing myself well enough to be able to recognize what I was feeling and dissect that and analyze it, and then be like, okay, I'm going to change this behavior because this is how I actually want the future to be. So I was able to recognize that power dynamic of, he doesn't actually have any power and I have tons of power, and he's just projecting this idea of power. He's acting loud and obnoxious and yelling out when he shouldn't be, and making jokes that only he finds are funny and belittling other people for no reason. And yeah, it's really irritating. So recognizing that he had more power, he was projecting more power than he actually had, and saying like, okay, no, but I have this kind of power in the situation. I have a lot of people here that like me. I like myself. And if anything happens, I'm willing to stand up for myself, or I'm willing to leave. And that's a form of power too. People don't recognize the power to leave a situation you don't like. Like, there's a lot of things that people don't recognize as a form of power. And my throat is dry, so I'm going to take a break before I continue this. So this next song is from Amber Lynn. This is Feel Good Drag. One thing that comes to the top of my head is when someone has a crush on you, that creates a power dynamic. And that's something I've learned through experience, both through my having a crush, but I mostly came to acknowledge it through other people having crushes on me, because they would let me like say things that I knew I was like, wait, I just said a really rude thing, and they wouldn't call me out on it. And that happens a lot when people have a crush on me. It's like I would say something rude and I wouldn't realize it at first, and then I'd be like, wait, I just said something very rude. And they would not call me out on it. They would not say like, oh, what you said is really bad, because they wanted me to like them, because they have a crush on me and they want me to like them back. And that creates a power dynamic where you get a certain space to do things that they won't let anyone else do. You can be late. You can tell them to wait for hours. You can insult them in certain ways. You can like ask them for money and ask them for food and like tons of stuff like that, and they're just like, I want you to like me, so I'm going to let you do this. And it's like, no, don't let me do this. Call me out on my bad behavior. I don't always recognize it myself, so yeah. And I've had people who stopped having a crush on me, and then all of a sudden they like got really mean and mad at me because they're like, I don't like what you're doing, but they'd been fine with it the whole entire time that I'd known them. So in that respect, it's really important to recognize when you're letting someone have more power over you, because in that instance you're not standing up for yourself, then you're okay with. So if someone has a lot more power, then you usually let people, recognizing it and saying like, okay, I'm letting them do this. Am I okay with continuing to let them do this, or is this going to be something I'm going to blow up about later? Am I going to get really, really ticked off later and be like, oh God, what did I do? Or what did I let them do? Why do I let them treat me like this? And saying like, okay, no, I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to stand up for myself, and I'm going to say, like, I don't like this. And one of my really close friends and I have established a really good system for us where we're like, hey, I need to talk to you. That thing you did, not cool. This is why. But we're very calm about it, because we just say, like, hey, this is something I haven't brought up, and now I'm really feeling like I should. And we both have anxiety over doing stuff like that, so it's kind of good to be both in that spot. So in that way, we're able to be equal, where he has a crush on me, and I recognize that, and we're like, we still want to be friends, even though we don't want to go out. And we're able to recognize that power dynamic, at least I am, and I don't abuse it, and I make sure that I'm like, okay, well, what I just asked him to do, I shouldn't ask him too many more times. I shouldn't rely on him to do these types of things as often. I should be able to do this myself or whatever. And I recognize that I have that power within that dynamic. And also when I do things, I'm like, hey, I just did a crappy thing. Why didn't you yell at me? And he'll be like, I'm fine with it. And I'm like, no, you're not. What you just did was not, like, what I just did was not cool, and you didn't call me out on it. Please call me out on it in the future. I'm okay with being called out on it. And then he also says that to me, because there are times when I'm too anxious to bring something up, and he'll be like, hey, anytime. Like, sometimes he stands too close to me, and I'll be like, and I'm like, I don't want to be stood this close next to, or that came out in a weird phrasing, but I don't want someone standing so close to me right now. And so he's like, no, tell me when I'm standing too close, please. I don't want to don't realize it sometimes, and I want to get better at that, and just let me know when I'm standing too close. So we recognize that there's a difference in power dynamics within our friendship, and we're able to reconcile that by being open and honest and saying, like, hey, this is happening, and I don't like it, and being honest about that, and being receptive also. It wouldn't work if one or either of us was giving out criticism and not taking criticism. So the thing is that we both take criticism, and that's extremely important because it's very one-sided or claustrophobic almost when you're trying to be friends with someone and every time you say, like, hey, this thing that you did, I really didn't like it, they blow up or say no and deny your feelings and invalidate you. That is not a good sign of a good friendship, and it's a one-sided thing, and it creates a power dynamic where one person can't criticize the other, but the other one can criticize all they want. And that is a horrible power dynamic that a lot of people have, and it's not good. It's not healthy. If you're not letting someone else criticize you, then honestly, like, everyone makes mistakes, and this is what's helped me allow for other people to criticize me and to not get upset over it. Everyone makes mistakes, and that's what makes us human. We are human. Like, I don't want to be anything other than human. A cat, maybe. But, like, I want to be average, Not like, oh, I want to change myself, but I want to be how do I explain this? It's something I understand in my head, but it's harder to explain out loud. I don't want to be above everyone else. I don't want to be like some god or something. I don't want to be the perfect pedestal from which everyone looks up and admires. I don't want to be that. And maybe some people do, and that makes it harder for them to accept criticism, but I don't want to be perfect because being perfect comes with so many expectations. People expect you to be perfect all the time. People expect you to do everything right, and they even want you to do things for them. And there's just so many expectations and so much responsibility in being perfect. And I don't want that kind of responsibility. I want to be able to make mistakes. I want to be able to be human and suffer sometimes and get corrected on the things I do wrong. And I want to people to be like, okay, there's a certain wiggle room because you're human and you make mistakes. If I was perfect all the time, then there wouldn't be that wiggle room. People would be like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be perfect. And that would be disappointing and invalidating. So I don't want to be perfect. I want to be human. I want to make mistakes. So recognizing that that's part of my existence is making mistakes, at the same time wanting to be better, and recognizing that it's kind of counterintuitive to exist imperfectly yet want to be better and not want to be perfect. But that's kind of that's my medium, that's my middle ground, that's my balance, is I want to be better than I am, but I'll never be perfect, and I'm okay with that. So every day I work to get better, and in order to get better, I have to recognize the mistakes I make as a human being, as a flawed existence, and that's just part of what living is for a human being, and that as long as I exist, I will be making mistakes, and if I want to get better, I have to recognize that and keep going. So I'm able to take that, and I hope that makes sense, because I felt like I was a little wandering around, but or wandering all over the place with my words. But that's what I want, is to be able to be criticized, and that allows for a power dynamic that when other people are also willing to be criticized, we can have an equal ground and equal discussion. However, it does allow for a power dynamic where someone who doesn't want to take criticism and wants to talk about themselves in a positive light all the way, it allows them to come in and take up a lot of room in a relationship, in a friendship. And pushing back is sometimes important, or just cutting off the friendship. A lot of times I cut off the friendship because I'm like, you're not meeting me where I'm at. You're not doing a 50-50 friendship. You just want as much as you can take, and you're taking it, and I'm not okay with that. The person who's I was talking about before, who like falsified their own power dynamic, they are someone who I tried to criticize and say, like, hey, you're treating me this way and I don't like it, and you've been treating me this way for years, and I should have spoken up sooner. And I did recognize, like, I should have spoken up sooner, but I wasn't able to, so I'm speaking up now. And they did not want to hear it. They wanted to blame me for everything. They wanted to say that it was so stupid. Oh my gosh, I don't like to use that word too much, but it was so ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. They like told me that it wasn't up to them how I interpreted their actions, and basically saying, like, there was no way I could ever criticize them because it was my brain that was doing it, and it had nothing to do with what he was actually doing. And he was like, oh, well, no matter what I do, it's not up to me how you interpret it. And I'm like, being rude to me is not a matter of me interpreting it. It's your action. Can you not? And he just didn't want to admit that he could ever be wrong, which I should have seen coming because that's just how he was. But that whole thing of me going forward and saying, like, I don't like this, was actually an exercise in my own power dynamics, because a lot of times I won't step forward and I won't say I don't like this, and I wanted to get better at it. I wanted to practice it, and I knew that it was probably going to end with me not ever talking to him again. I knew that from the beginning of that conversation. I was like, this is probably going to end this way, and I'm okay with this because I don't like the way he's treating me anyway. But I want to see where it goes, and if this friendship is possibly salvageable, and basically just I want to get the practice in. I want to practice exercising my power and over myself. So that's what that was, which is important to practice your power, and allowing yourself to have that power, and taking in that personal powers. You don't always have to have external power. You can have the internal power to say, I don't like this situation and I'm going to do something about it. Whether that's walking away or staying and fixing the situation or reporting it to a manager, or someone above the manager, whatever it is, just exercising that right to no longer be a part of an unhealthy situation. So allowing yourself to be criticized is also part of the power dynamic. And, like, if someone is just, like that guy I was talking about, if he's just refusing to accept that he has power within that friendship or whatever the relationship may be, and refusing to accept that their actions are equal to yours, and that what they do is not okay, or that sometimes they're going to have to change because you don't like being treated a certain way, whatever it is. If they're not willing to accept that, my honest opinion is just walk away. I think it's way more work than it's worth to sit in there and be miserable and try to change someone who's unwilling to change. I don't think it's healthy, and in my experience, it's never worked. The most it's ever worked is when I stepped back and I said, fine, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to live my life, and they are present. And when they want to change, we'll have more of a close relationship. Until then, it's just a passing acquaintance. And it was with someone I couldn't just walk away from. So that ended up giving them the space, and I was like, I'm going to change whether or not you're changing. because I want to be this way and I want to be better. And if you decide not to change, fine, I don't care anymore. And that actually left room for them to decide on their own that they were going to look at what I've done and do something similar with their own life in their own way. And now they're better at taking criticism. Not amazingly good at it, but that person is better at it. So whether it's stepping away or stepping back, I just suggest giving someone who won't take criticism space, because there's probably something going on in their own head that they're not dealing with, that is making it so that they can't be criticized. And I've had friends that were like that, where I just stopped talking to them for years at a time, and then because of the wonderful world of the World Wide Web, on Facebook, I connected with them years later, and they were much better at taking criticism and talking about the things that they had done wrong, and things that they just didn't do right. Sometimes it's not even necessarily like, you did that wrong. It's like, it's not right. It's not what I really wanted. Or like, I didn't really like that, but it's not like you wronged me or anything, but I didn't like it. So just allowing people that space sometimes is important too, if that's the type of person they are. If there's someone who really needs to think it through on their own and make it their own decision instead of listening to you tell them, then yeah, that's important too, to give people space. Alright, while I collect my thoughts, this next song is from Seawolf. This is The Garden That You Planted.